All right, hey everybody. This is I'm recording this Wednesday morning after class yesterday. So my voice is I still got my morning voice on. Just wanted to do a couple quick summary things, and I won't do this every week, but quite often I'll record just a short little intro to the week's work. Anything I forget to say in class, which is going to be a lot of the time, I think. Um, but I didn't want to link these with the actual lectures. As I said in class, most of the lectures are recorded 2 years ago, and I want to keep using them. So if I tie them too closely to an individual class, I can't reuse the lectures. So keep that in mind. There's going to be a couple lectures I'm going to record or re-record. I know I got at least one new one I'm going to do later. But most of these were recorded 2 years ago. And, every so often I might accidentally reference something to 2 years ago. So like I might say today in class I mentioned this, but I actually, which is awful. I hate hearing my voice, but I did go through most of the lectures before the semester started just to make sure that they are still relevant. Anyway, I just want to welcome everybody to the class. Um, like I said, this video might be a tiny bit longer than most of the weekly videos. Most of them will be about 5 minutes. This will be a little bit longer. I did want to go over your class surveys and the little response to the TV show yesterday. Um, again, because we only meet once every week, and I know I'm spending a lot of the time getting the tech right. Thanks for being patient with me, both those in Tifton and in Bainbridge. You're going to hear me say, "Can you hear me?" a lot. Um, but anyway, I didn't want to suck up too much class time doing this, but I did want to go over some of this. Um, and again, like I said, I went over the surveys, and most of you, not surprisingly, are history and government majors. I think we have 14 at the moment. 11 of you are, in the history and government program, but we got three outside: biology, rural development, and writing and communication. And, I just always wanted to say that even though it is a history class and we do talk like historians in the class, it is designed so that, it's kind of open to anybody. And so I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable. And in fact, the class originally began years ago when we were still Bainbridge State College, before we merged with ABAC, and we used to offer this as a 2 credit course for intro level, like 2000 level. And again, that was designed for, like none of my students were history majors back then. So again, I've upgraded the class and all that, but it's still the core of the class is the same. So it is kind of meant to be open to everybody. And again, I'm kind of glad that it looks like when I looked at surveys, a lot of you didn't know some of the stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. A couple of you knew everything, but most of you didn't know a lot of the references. And that's good. I actually kind of like them. A couple of quick things I want to talk about for the class itself before I get into like the surveys and such. In other words, the important stuff. First off, I know the three that are, are based in Bainbridge. Um, they create a separate Georgia view when we do two sites like that. I've enrolled everybody who's in Bainbridge. I've enrolled you into the main Georgia View page. So when you sign in as a student to Georgia View, you'll see all your classes listed. You'll see two for U.S. in the Modern World, and it'll be really obvious which one is the one where everybody's in because it'll be the one with everything. So anyway, I sent an email to those students, but just in case, just make sure you sign into the right one. And in a minute, I'm going to share the screen so you can actually see what the right one looks like. So everyone should be in the same Georgia View now. So when you just do discussions, you can actually talk to each other. Um, let's see. Probably the biggest thing that I didn't really get to yesterday is this week's assignment. And so when you looked at your handouts that I gave you, you had the survey, you had the all in the family sheet, you had the syllabus, the reading sheet, the lecture sheet. But you also had a couple other things that I didn't really talk about. One was the research paper, a summary of the research paper. We did talk briefly about that. And go ahead and start thinking about, what you might want to write on. You still got a few weeks before you have to pick a topic, a broad topic, and then you can narrow throughout the semester. But, again, I do want you working on this the whole semester, building up a bibliography, coming up eventually with an outline, coming up with a good thesis, and then eventually writing the thing at the end. So what you should be doing in the next few weeks is you got your year. Start really looking at that year. Get on Wikipedia and look up whatever year you have, and it'll kind of talk about some of the main events that year. And be thinking about what you're already interested in and how you can apply that to your year. They do have to be history papers. I say that because some of like the students that are more leaning towards political science, sometimes they want to analyze a law or a Supreme Court case, and that gets a little bit more into Dr. Devaney's territory or more Dr. Vors's territory. For the non-majors, don't worry about those references. Or somebody that might be in literature, they want to analyze a novel or something. Again, that's not quite what a historian does. But we can tweak some of these topics. If you do have something that's a little too outside of history, we can tweak it to make it history. So don't censor yourself at this point, but go ahead and be even right now. Go ahead and start thinking about it, thinking about what's happening in your year and what you might want to write about. But anyway, for week one, in addition to all that, you had a sheet that said article critiques, just like a little instructions of how to read an article or a chapter. Because not every week, but a lot of the weeks, we are going to have readings, and you're going to kind of summarize them. And so make sure you read over that because you do have an assignment this week. And like I said, I forgot to kind of really get into it in class. The last thing that you got were two stapled copies of intros to two different books. They're not very long at all. They're going to be a little boring. The reading is going to be a little boring this week. One is they're both from books about the 70s. They're both by historians. One's from 2000, I think one's from 2004, and they basically go over what historians say about the 70s. And I partly did it because the intro to the book that you have, even though I like the book, the intro is terrible. There's nothing to it. So we'll kind of do this for the 80s and 90s as well. But for now, what I want you to do is just read over those two chapters. Again, summarize in one page essentially what they're saying. And again, I know some of you, especially the non-history majors, you may not have read much history before. Don't overthink it, and then post it. To I think I have it as a discussion post. You don't really have to comment on each other for this one. It's just basically you're throwing it up there. But you might want to read some of the others because somebody else may pick up on something that you didn't pick up on. And so it's kind of a good way to kind of learn from each other. And again, having more eyes on something at the same time. Actually, let me go ahead and share the screen. Real quick, so give me 2 seconds as I do this. Okay. Just real quick, I just want you to, again, I have it in student view right now. So I'm creating the announcement. So there's no announcements at the moment. But usually every week I'll have like right on the splash page, sort of that week's announcement, including these little videos. So again, they're just not up yet. But also one thing to do is go ahead. I mean, usually these things will pop up in the calendar. I know students usually kind of live in the calendar, but kind of get in the habit, at least for this class, of going to content. My internet's a little slow today. And oh yeah, I forgot it pops up to that. So, again, everything I gave out yesterday, the syllabus is on there. And I have it at student view. So this is what you should guys be seeing. Here's the, article video reaction, how just, what I'm looking for in these little summaries. Again, we're just looking for one page. And then the midterm review. And again, I will update this a little bit as we get closer to the midterm, but again, kind of keep this beside you as you're both in class, but also when you're watching the lectures online. It gives you a little sense of what I'm going to be asking you. And then this is the reading assignments for the textbook. And again, just have these done by the time of the midterm. Reading assignments will also include any of these handouts like for this week. Those count as well. And again, I gave you guys the research paper assignment already and the two essays, one on TV, one on movies. Those are there as well. But again, I kind of have it where you can only see right now. I kind of got the others kind of blocked out. Next week 2 will pop up. But get in the habit of always clicking on, week 1, week 2. So again, this little intro should show up there. But this is the actual lecture this week. And then this is a link to uploading your summaries. And again, so whatever you got to do for that week, it'll just be right there under content. Just kind of, again, on the front page, I'll try to link everything, but still, always make sure you click on that week's lecture, or excuse me, that week's content, just to make sure there's something I forgot to put on the thing. The one thing about the lecture for this week, it's pre-recorded from a couple years ago. First off, I did screw up. Big surprise. Towards the end, I played some clips, and it was my first lecture I'd recorded for that class, and I forgot to share the sound. Big surprise, right? Because I did that yesterday. And so it's right at the end. I'm playing a couple of clips, and you can see the clips, but you just essentially hear me breathing and drinking coffee. So there's links to all the clips I play, both in the YouTube description, but also in the announcements will be all the links. So if you can, if you want to actually watch, I think it's a couple of songs and a couple of clips from movies. You can just click on the actual YouTube link and it'll take you right to it. Again, they didn't let me embed it. I usually like to embed the video so it's really obvious, but because there's some copyrighted material in there, they only let me link to it. YouTube has only let me link to it, so that's why it says open link. But anyway, just make sure you do watch it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Anyway, so that's kind of the big stuff for this week. I'm looking at my notes, make sure there's not anything else I need to say. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about the just the class surveys. Again, I won't identify anybody. But just in kind of summarize. So again, as far as your majors, 10 of you are history and government majors, and then we have the 3 others. And then because I didn't have it as a question, this is an older form, and I've only been recently asking, what do you want to do after college? Because that's really the question I like. But a few of you answered it. So a couple of you want to go into the health field. We got a couple of people that want to be rangers. I know one's leaning towards ranger, maybe in other environment and focused jobs. And again, I used to be a ranger, and my wife still works for the Florida Park Service. So that's, to me, that's neat and exciting. And somebody wants to go into the seminary. A couple of you want to go into law. Somebody specifically wants to own and run a Chick-fil-A franchise. A couple of you want to go into museums. I did a little bit of that when I was younger. One definitely wants to go into teaching. Another one wants to be a professor. So, then I ask you guys, and most of you are from Southwest Georgia. You guys are, every once in a while we'll have students that are, originally from somewhere else, but it looks like everybody's from Tifton or areas surrounding Tifton. I got a couple Sylvesters, Omega, a couple from Bainbridge. Got a couple one from Colquitt, Oglethorpe County, and Adele. That was the one I was missing, Adele. And again, I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I still live in Florida. I live in Quincy, Florida. So I'm just over the state line below Bainbridge, and I'm about just a few minutes outside of Tallahassee. So I'm about 2 hours away from Tifton, is another way to say it. So, anyway, I asked you guys for what you thought were the 3 most important events since 1970. I really kind of meant to cut it off at 2000, but I didn't do that. And I probably would agree with this answer. The number one answer, 9 of you out of 14 wrote 9/11. Now, as somebody who's older, there might be some events like the end of the Cold Wars, which a couple of you put. I probably would put that as my number one. But I think 9/11 is actually a very good answer. 5 of you said Watergate. Let's see, 4 of you said the Vietnam War. Again, I think that is a big one. We're not going to get super into that, but we do have to talk about it because it technically ran until 1973, and it officially ended until 1975. So, definitely within the purview of this class. Dr. Galt Brown has taught courses on it before. Last time we taught this course, he had just taught the Vietnam War course over the summer. And I was wondering if one of you had maybe taken a course, just based on your answers. It sounded like you were pretty familiar with the war. And we'll briefly touch on it. Let's see. Again, 2 of you say end of the Cold War. 2 of you said COVID, the war on terror, the Iraq War, Chernobyl, the invention of cell phones, which actually I'm glad somebody is thinking about technology and how much that plays a role. We are going to talk about I would say the internet. I would say without a doubt the internet. Internet technically has been around since 69, but for all intents and purposes, it was the mid-90s that the internet really came around. Somebody said the flight of Apollo 3, Nixon going to China, U.S. invading Cambodia. That was what I was wondering, like, ooh, they knew about that. Maybe they took that course. And I think there's one more, and I can't read my own handwriting. Shoot. So if I didn't, oh, Kent State, Middle East Wars, and anyway, if I skipped one of yours, I'm sorry. Okay. As far as who you guys thought was the best president, the worst president, favorite president, I always ask this question. I like this one. For some reason, people don't ever answer the best one. I don't know if it's just the way it's on the form. People maybe just skip it. Maybe I need to rearrange the format of the survey because everybody skips that one. And so I don't know why, if they just don't want to answer it or they just literally don't see that first one. So only a few of you answered it. Three is the only one that answered that one. So we got a Trump, we got a Reagan, and we got a Clinton. I really meant to cut it off in 1970, but that's okay. For worst president, only two didn't answer. So we got a James Buchanan. Now I will say I did mean after 1970. So I would agree with you about Buchanan, but 100 years earlier. And anyway, so we got two Biden, four Carter, two Reagan, two George W. Bush, and one Obama. And two didn't answer. And then for your favorite president, again, we did get a couple of really old ones. We got a couple of Teddy Roosevelts and FDR. Again, I really meant after 1970. We got one Trump, got five Reagan. So Reagan seems to be pretty popular in this class. One Carter, one Nixon, and one Obama. So again, you guys seem to be maybe leaning a little bit on more the Reagan Trump side rather than the Obama Carter side. But again, we got a nice little mix there. One thing I'll say, because we are going to talk about presidents quite a bit, and we're going to talk about presidents from Nixon to Ford to Carter to Reagan to H.W. Bush to Clinton, maybe touch on George W. Bush a tiny bit, and that will be it. We won't do the later ones. And we're going to be very fair to all of them. As a historian, and as I get older, I find I tend to like most of them, even Nixon. So I think some of these presidents you're going to find were better than you might think, especially like Carter. Carter always gets slammed, and yet, by the way, he's still alive. They thought he was going to die a long time ago. He's barely, but he in early October he'll turn 100, and so we'll see if he makes it. Not to sound morbid, I do think, if I had to guess, probably during this course, I would not be surprised if we see him pass. But it would be cool if we actually see an ex-president make it all the way to 100. So anyway, I always ask students, why do you not like Carter? I mean, he's from Southwest Georgia, for goodness sake. And they're always like, oh, he sucked. Like, why? Oh, he just sucked. But I find most people that weren't alive back then don't really have a firm answer. He was not the best president, but I think after this class, you will feel like he wasn't the worst president. At the same time, Reagan, who I've grown to like more and more as I get older, um, and he tends to always be very popular. I think you will still like him after this class, but I think you'll be a little more critical of him as well because actually he got himself a little bit of trouble. Meaning, all the presidents you're going to have a greater appreciation for, but you're also going to be, you're going to learn some of their problems as well. Again, we're going to be very fair to all the presidents. So I may ask that same question at the end of the class and just see if anybody answers change. And then a couple, not personal, but I'm a big reader. And obviously I do like my pop culture, especially films. So I always ask these questions. And I always say the same thing. Read more. That is the best advice I can give all of you is read, especially the majors most of you are in. It's all reading and writing. And in fact, one of you is literally in writing major. And you can't write well unless you read a lot. And I know we all, I mean, I do too. I'm on my phone a lot. So that does kind of suck up a lot of bandwidth of our reading, but really get in the habit of reading, have a book everywhere. I mean, I always say you have time because you got to go to the bathroom, put a book on the back of the toilet, knock out a chapter every time you go. I mean, you can find the time to read. You just got to make that time. It's the best thing you can do. A couple of you are readers. A couple Hunger Games seems to have popped up a lot this semester. It seems, it ends with us with a couple of you had read Men We Need. But again, overwhelmingly, most of you did look like you're not reading. Get in that habit. Same with films. I know that dates me asking what your favorite film is. Movies are not as big as they used to be. But more of you seem to watch movies in some of my classes. So for the last year, a couple for Anyone But You, Oppenheimer, Mario, couple didn't have one. Dune Part Two. Um, it ends with us. Gosh, my handwriting's so terrible. I can't read that one either. And Mayor of, I don't know that one. Mayor of, oh, I can't even read my handwriting. Anyway, you know which one it is. And then as far as all time, again, most of these are more recent. We got a couple of older. We got two for Interstellar, which my son likes a lot. He just watched it. Secretariat, Top Gun, but the sequel, the Maverick one, from 2 years ago, which I did like too. Um, let's see, we got the Harry Potter film. Somebody just likes romantic comedies, which, by the way, romantic comedies became a big thing in the 80s and 90s. Well, somebody got what happened, whatever happened to Baby Jane, which is a great movie from the early 60s, Hairspray, from the early 90s, Blade Runner. I'm assuming it's the original from 81, but might be the remake or this sequel. Okay, anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. Okay, so that's a little bit of you guys. And lastly, I'll do this super quick. I know I'm already running longer. I got to get to school. I got to teach today. I had you guys watch about 2/3 of an episode of All in the Family. A couple of quick comments. Partly I picked it because it was the #1 show in the early 70s. It is hugely cultural and historically significant of a series. The first, I mean, I think that was literally the I can't talk, third episode of the entire series. So they were still figuring it out a little bit. It was a little sillier. The characters were much broader. It does get a little more realistic as it moves on. I mean, it's still a comedy, but the characters become less caricatures. Um, and so that episode probably isn't the best representation, but I like it because it is talking about the politics of the day and specifically Nixon. And it's funny because that was before Watergate and all that. And yet you can see Nixon was already a very divisive character, a person. And again, I had you guys just kind of make some quick comments. I mean, a couple of you have seen it before. Most of you had not seen it. But half of you said you thought it was funny. I didn't hear a lot of laughter. That's okay. I will say it does get funnier if you ever do actually watch it. But again, this is not about being a fan of the show. This is just, I think it actually is a really good representation of the early 70s and kind of getting you guys used to sort of watching shows and trying to pick out historical aspects of it. Again, thinking about how like they're arguing over a television because there's most houses only had one TV. Things came on television one time. And maybe they get repeated a year later, but generally you had one shot at seeing something. No VCRs, obviously no YouTube, anything like that. Um, the relationships between the characters, even though it's really silly, it is interesting. You see the cultural clash, and that's definitely something that I think is less the case today than in, say, the 70s. The difference between somebody who was 20 and somebody who was 40 was so wide, completely different music, different attitudes, different ways of dressing. Now you can meet somebody, my age and somebody 20, and I mean, other than looking old, we may listen to literally the same music, watch the same TV shows, have the same, that we've kind of collapsed to some degree the differences between generations since the 70s. But here it was a very stark difference. And when I mean, I've obviously watched the show growing up and I've seen it a lot. But I had watched it many years. And then a few years ago, I rewatched several episodes when I was getting ready for this class. And I still found it amusing, but it was I forgot how much they do yell. And even the later shows, they yell a lot. And that's when a lot of you wrote mean, sarcastic. But for me, a lot of it is how women were portrayed. It gets a little bit better later in that, I mean, but it's all about the men, right? If you notice, it's all like, Edith, give me a beer, or Gloria, the younger, the daughter going, Dad, do what Michael wants. You should do what Mike. It's not what she wants, it's what Michael wants. And the show gets a little bit better, but it is very male focused. And real quick, a couple of you wrote, like, obviously we're supposed to identify with Archie. By the way, almost all of you identified more with Mike and Gloria. I mean, you don't want to identify with Archie because obviously he's problematic. The problem with the actor was so good that everyone ended up liking Archie anyway. Um, I mean, everybody who made the show, the actors, the the guy who created it, actually he adapted it. It was based on a British series, just like The Office. But even in Britain, they prefer All in the Family. But Norman Lear, he just died this year, also 100 years old. And I mean, he was very liberal. Almost every actor on the show was very liberal. I mean, so even though they show both sides, it's very obvious that really you're supposed to identify more with Mike and Gloria. That's Mike and Gloria really represent the voice of the show. And the purpose of Archie is supposed to be he says these outrageous things that nobody really says, but a lot of people used to think those things. Like, some of his comments about race. And then they would hear him say it and they would think, is that what I sound like? And so that was kind of the point of the show. But I think most viewers were sort of in the middle, maybe a little towards, kind of like you guys, maybe a little towards the younger people. But every so often Archie will say something and you'll go, well, he's kind of right. Not about race or stuff, but other stuff. And anyway, but yeah, most of you did seem to identify with the younger people. A couple said Edith. And like I said, I did see, outdated, mean, sarcastic. Um, like I said, we're not going to watch another whole episode, but we will watch some clips from it because again, for the 70s, it is incredibly significant. And there's other shows as we get a little later that will have that same. I mean, I always say Friends and Seinfeld for the 90s, Cosby Show, Cheers, Family Ties for the 80s. I mean, there were these shows that did kind of capture the moment, if you will. Other than that, and actually, as I'm talking, I realized I said I would put an episode of All in the Family up, so maybe I'll throw that under week one if you're interested in finishing the show. And I'll say it one more time: it's not the best episode of the series. If you're really interested, catch some of the later ones. But okay, that's it. That's enough. I've talked way too much. I'm just glad to have all you guys in the class. Hopefully, I didn't scare anybody away yesterday. When we come in on Tuesday, and I will be in Tifton on Tuesday, we will be doing the film. I actually have a short little lecture I'm going to do, a kind of a lighthearted one. And then we're going to jump into a film called Dirty Harry. But a real topic is about crime in America in the 70s. Alrighty, thank you guys. And I'll see you next week.